New York City looks almost magical under fresh snow, but beneath that postcard beauty lies something far more dangerous. Because when winter turns brutal in NYC, it doesn't just inconvenience, it kills. Some victims froze alone on city streets. Others were struck by storm-torn objects. Here are 5 of the most terrifying and brutal snowstorm-related deaths in New York City. Stark reminders that winter's beauty can hide a deadly edge.
16 of our fellow New Yorkers have passed away outside during this brutal stretch of cold. In 13 of these cases, preliminary findings indicate that hypothermia played a role, and 3 of these deaths appear to be overdose deaths.
The snow started as it always does in New York, soft, almost beautiful, drifting lazily from a steel gray sky, coating the streets in a deceptive quiet. Children laughed in Central Park as flakes settled on their scarves. Tourists raised cameras, capturing the magic of a city that seemed, just for a moment, suspended in white. By nightfall, it was something else entirely. Winter storm Fern didn't just arrive, it invaded. The Arctic front behind it dropped temperatures into the teens. Wind gusts ripped through canyons of glass and steel, tearing at coats, scarves, and the thin skin of anyone caught unprepared. Snow hardened into ice, frosting sidewalks into treacherous runways. Streets that usually hummed with taxis, deliveries, and late-night commuters became slick, quiet, and dangerous. Even the city's neon glow felt muted under the oppressive white haze. Then the calls began. Dispatchers' voices cracked over radio channels. Officers on patrol found bodies slumped against lampposts. EMS crews discovered unconscious individuals sprawled on benches, leaning against brick walls, pressed into doorways, or hiding in the shadow of scaffolding. In Brooklyn, in Queens, in Manhattan, across all 5 boroughs. Some victims had tried to survive in the only way they knew how, curling into alleyways, wrapping themselves in thin blankets, seeking refuge near subway grates that barely emitted heat. Others had simply misjudged the cold, thinking they could endure a few hours outside. But the Arctic wind didn't negotiate. Over the course of the storm and the unrelenting freeze that followed, at least 15 people were confirmed dead from hypothermia or cold-related exposure. Many were discovered in the pre-dawn hours, when temperatures bottomed out, and the wind cut through even the thickest layers of clothing. Hypothermia doesn't scream. It doesn't announce itself with drama. It is a slow, invisible predator. First comes the shivering, then confusion, slurred speech, odd behavior. Some victims experience paradoxical undressing, shedding clothing in a deadly illusion of warmth as their bodies' systems shut down. When stillness finally comes, rescue is often too late. In one Queens courtyard, a 67-year-old man was found curled into himself, a thin coat no match for the wind that sliced through the brick maze of surrounding buildings. In Brooklyn, a young woman with schizophrenia had wandered from her shelter, seeking warmth near a subway grate, only to collapse on the icy pavement, unseen for hours. In Manhattan's Lower East Side, a homeless couple huddled together under a tarp, only to be discovered the next morning, lifeless, their bodies stiff as the ice around them. What made Winter Storm Fern especially terrifying was not just its severity, but its duration. The snow didn't melt, the cold didn't break. Day after day, the city remained locked in sub-freezing temperatures, turning each night into a survival test. Emergency Code Blue protocols were activated citywide. Warming centers opened in schools and community centers. Outreach teams fanned out through parks, underpasses, and train stations. Volunteers carried hot drinks and blankets, but even the best efforts could not reach everyone. Some victims were elderly, some were homeless, some battled mental health issues, others simply underestimated the lethal power of a city frozen in place. And perhaps the most terrifying part of all, this wasn't a remote mountain tragedy. It wasn't a wilderness expedition gone wrong. This happened beneath the towers and traffic lights of one of the densest, most alive cities in the world. Bodies were found under flickering neon signs, beside rumbling subway entrances, just steps away from apartment windows where lights stayed on, oblivious to the death creeping below. The snow fell quietly. The city moved on. But for at least 15 people, Winter Storm Fern and the unyielding deep freeze became a silent, freezing end. A reminder that in New York City, winter is not just inconvenient, it can be deadly, and the storm left an imprint, not just in the snowdrifts piled along Fifth Avenue or the frozen puddles of Times Square, but in the whispered warnings carried in the icy wind. Even in the city that never sleeps, nature can strike without notice, and survival is never guaranteed.
Mamdani just announced that the city still remains in code blue and that 16 New Yorkers have died from the cold. Mamdani says in 13 of the cases, hypothermia played a role.
By the time February arrived, New York City was no longer just cold. It was locked in a relentless freeze. The snow from earlier storms had hardened into gray, jagged banks along sidewalks. Every street corner seemed sharper, every alley darker. Icy wind tunneled through avenues, carving through gaps between buildings like a silent blade. Street signs rattled in the gusts, and even the hum of traffic felt muffled, swallowed by the cold. Footsteps crunched across frozen puddles, the sound harsh against the city's usual rhythm. Nightfall brought no relief. Temperatures plunged into the teens, with wind chills that made skin sting even through layers. The city's familiar soundtrack, taxi horns, subway rumble, late-night chatter, felt muted under the weight of the freeze. Somewhere, unseen, the cold was doing its work. Then the numbers began to surface. By early February 2026, the New York City Office of Chief Medical Examiner confirmed 16 outdoor deaths during the prolonged cold snap. The cases spanned multiple boroughs, from Manhattan's bustling sidewalks to Brooklyn's narrow side streets, from Queens transit corridors to quiet stretches of the Bronx and Staten Island. Many deaths were directly linked to hypothermia. In others, it was a silent contributing factor, working alongside exhaustion, age, or underlying health conditions. What made this stretch especially terrifying wasn't just the snowfall, it was the duration. The freeze did not ease. Day after day, the temperature refused to rise above danger. Night after night, the cold deepened. Every hour spent outdoors became more perilous than the last, and every evening a test of human endurance. First responders described finding victims in places New Yorkers pass every day without a second thought, near subway entrances, beneath scaffolding, outside shuttered storefronts, along park pathways. Some appeared to have been seeking shelter from the wind. Others may have been disoriented, wandering aimlessly, overcome by the creeping effects of exposure. Hypothermia doesn't strike like lightning. It moves quietly. Shivering is the first warning, a desperate tremor of a failing system. Judgment falters. Confusion sets in, muscles weaken. In severe cases, victims can become paradoxically calm, even removing clothing as their body misfires, unaware that organs are shutting down. By the time someone notices, the window for survival is razor thin. During this deep freeze, emergency code blue measures were deployed across the city. Warming centers opened in schools, community centers and churches. Outreach teams combed parks, subway entrances and streets. Volunteers carried blankets, hot drinks and words of encouragement. But the cold did not yield. It did not discriminate by borough. It did not pause for daylight. It did not care how close help might have been. 16 lives ended not in dramatic blizzard rescues or headline-grabbing catastrophes, but in stillness, in silence, in the kind of freezing darkness that creeps across the city after midnight, curling into alleys, under benches, along fire escapes, and inside the hollow hum of subway grates. In a city defined by motion, energy, and noise, February 2026 revealed a different kind of predator. A winter that didn't roar. It waited, and it claimed lives quietly, with a precision that was almost invisible, almost undetectable. A chilling reminder that, in New York City, survival can hinge not on ambition, opportunity, or strength, but on sheer luck against a force as silent as it is unstoppable.
At least 17 people have been reported dead in the wake of Winter Storm Jonas. Most of the deaths were caused by traffic accidents. Governor Andrew Cuomo announced a travel ban Saturday for New York City. Roads, above-ground subway systems, buses, and railway lines closed for the storm.
When Winter Storm Jonas roared into New York City in January 2016, it didn't just snow, it buried the city. Nearly 28 inches fell in the Central Park. setting a record at the time and transforming familiar streets into white canyons. Cars disappeared beneath drifts. Streetlights jutted from mounds of snow like lonely sentinels. Entire avenues fell silent. Public transit ground to a halt. Highways, normally clogged with ceaseless traffic, lay empty under the weight of frozen white. The city looked frozen in a photograph, immaculate yet ominous. But once the storm clouds passed, the real danger began. As the sun rose over a city entombed in snow, residents emerged with shovels in hand. Sidewalks needed clearing. Cars had to be unearthed. Entrances were blocked. The snow was thick, wet, and unyielding. The kind that clings to a shovel, resists every lift, and presses down on shoulders, back, and chest. For some, that effort proved fatal. In the days following the storm, at least 5 people in the NYC area died from heart attacks or medical emergencies triggered while shoveling snow. 2 fatalities occurred in Queens, 2 in other boroughs, and 1 in Staten Island. What seemed like a routine winter chore, a task of civic responsibility and personal safety, became a deadly strain on the body. Shoveling snow is deceptively dangerous. The cold constricts blood vessels, forcing the heart to work harder. The lifting, twisting, and repetitive motion spikes heart rate and blood pressure. For individuals with underlying cardiac conditions, some diagnosed, some not, the combination can be lethal. Witnesses described chilling scenes. One man was found slumped over his partially cleared driveway, the shovel still clutched in his hands. Another collapsed mid-lift, neighbors rushing to dial 911 as snow clung to his coat. Others were taken to hospitals, emergency rooms filled with frostbitten, exhausted, and overexerted bodies, but could not be revived. The storm itself had passed, but its weight, literal, physiological, and unforgiving, lingered. That's what made Winter Storm Jonas so unnerving. The headlines focused on record-breaking totals, viral images of empty Times Square buried in snow, and the awe-inspiring power of the blizzard. But the true horror unfolded quietly on residential blocks, along driveways and sidewalks where people were simply trying to reclaim normal life. No dramatic rescues, no collapsing buildings, no breaking news footage, just a shovel, a heartbeat, and snow too heavy to lift. Winter storm. Jonas proved that in New York City, the deadliest moment of a snowstorm isn't always when it's falling. Sometimes it's the morning after, and sometimes survival is as fragile as the thin layer of ice that forms on the shovel's handle in the freezing dawn.
New York ended 1947 with the greatest fall of snow it's ever seen, over 25 inches in about 16 hours.
It arrived without warning. On the night of December 25, 1947, as families across New York City lingered over dinner tables and beneath Christmas trees, snow began to fall. At first, it seemed harmless, almost picturesque, a holiday touch that complemented twinkling lights and the scent of pine. But by midnight, the snowfall had thickened, relentless. By morning, the city was vanishing beneath it. More than 2 feet of snow blanketed New York in less than 24 hours. In some areas, drifts climbed beyond 10 feet, swallowing cars whole, blocking doorways, and sealing neighborhoods in eerie silence. Streets disappeared beneath the white weight. Elevated trains froze in place, their iron rails coated in ice. Buses stalled where they stood, passengers trapped inside as exhaust fumes mingled with the frigid air. Thousands of commuters were stranded overnight, some stuck in subway cars and rail stations with little heat, breathing in the cold and uncertainty. What made the storm especially terrifying was its suddenness. Forecasting in 1947 lacked satellites, radar grids, and smartphone alerts. There were no modern tracking models. The city went to bed on Christmas thinking winter had been mild, believing the worst had not yet arrived, and awoke buried under a blinding white. Emergency crews struggled to move. Snowplows were overwhelmed. Fire trucks crawled through impassable streets. Ambulances faced delays, fighting through drifts just to reach hospitals. For days, New York was effectively frozen in place. The normal rhythm of the city halted, replaced by an oppressive stillness, and the cold followed close behind. Across the greater Northeast, the blizzard was linked to 77 deaths, including several in New York City. Many were victims of exposure or heart attacks triggered by shoveling. Others succumbed to accidents in the chaos, vehicles stranded in deep snow, people slipping on hidden ice, or trapped in unheated homes. Some collapsed while clearing paths for neighbors. Others never made it home. Families awoke to find doors blocked, cars buried, and lives quietly lost amid the drifts. The silence after the storm was haunting. Manhattan's avenues, usually alive with taxis, buses, and hurried footsteps, had become white corridors. Children played atop snow mounds that hid buried automobiles, their laughter a fragile contrast to the unseen tragedies beneath. Amid the surreal winter beauty, grief and fear lingered quietly in homes across the city. The blizzard of 1947 forced New York to rethink snow removal entirely. The city implemented more aggressive plowing systems and, in an unprecedented effort, resorted to dumping massive amounts of collected snow into the Hudson River. It was a logistical feat, born of necessity, and a stark lesson in the power of sudden winter fury. But for dozens of families, Christmas 1947 would never be remembered for gifts or celebrations. It would be remembered for the night the snow didn't stop. For the city, winter had arrived, not with warning, but with a quiet, suffocating inevitability. A force that could bury streets, stall lives, and claim them, silently, beneath the whiteness. By February 1969, winter had already worn down the Northeast. Streets were hardened with ice, sidewalks were cracked from repeated freezes, the air carried a biting edge that gnawed at exposed skin. And then the nor'easter arrived, and it did not come quietly. The storm intensified rapidly off the Atlantic coast, drawing warm ocean moisture into the Arctic air mass, and then dumping it inland. Snow fell in sheets, relentless and unyielding. Winds whipped through the city, carving blinding tunnels of white through the streets. In New York City, more than 2 feet of snow piled atop sidewalks and streets, burying cars, grounding flights, and turning highways into frozen parking lots. Visibility dropped to near zero at times, the world outside reduced to a wall of snow. But the most terrifying scenes were not from the air. They unfolded on the ground. Motorists attempting to outrun the storm became trapped. Cars slid into ditches, engines stalled, and doors froze shut. Some vehicles were abandoned mid-highway, their occupants huddled together for warmth, waiting for rescue that could not come fast enough. Others became coffins of steel and glass as temperatures plummeted and exhaust fumes mixed with the frigid air. Emergency crews fought through drifts and ice, battling a storm that seemed determined to consume everything in its path. Air travel was paralyzed. Trains were delayed or immobilized. Emergency services were stretched to their limits. Power lines fell beneath the snow's weight, leaving homes dark as temperatures continued to fall. Elderly residents and families without reliable heat faced a slow, creeping danger. One measured not in minutes, but in hours of exposure. Across the mid-Atlantic and New England, the storm was linked to at least 94 deaths. Many resulted from exposure, vehicle accidents on slick roads, and heart attacks triggered by strenuous snow removal. In and around New York City, the combination of heavy snowfall and Arctic cold proved particularly lethal. The city's density, its crowded streets and bustling avenues, became a hazard rather than a convenience when mobility itself was immobilized. What made the February 1969 nor'easter especially brutal was its scale. This wasn't a neighborhood trapped for a night. It was an entire corridor of states locked down simultaneously. Interstate highways became lifelines cut off by drifting snow. Rural communities were isolated. Urban centers were overwhelmed. The storm's reach was measured not in blocks, but in hundreds of miles. Photographs from the aftermath show a city under siege, cars nearly buried, rooftops sagging beneath the weight of snow, streets lined with abandoned vehicles, and long lines of stranded travelers waiting for buses or trains that would not arrive for days. Sidewalks were ghostly corridors, the usual hum of footsteps replaced by the crunch of snow under solitary boots. For many, the storm was remembered as a logistical nightmare. For nearly 100 families, it was something far worse. The February 1969 nor'easter stands as one of the deadliest winter storms of its era, a chilling reminder that when snow, wind, and Arctic cold converge, the consequences are swift, widespread, and unforgiving. And in a city and region that prided itself on resilience, it left a quiet, lingering fear. Even in the places we think we control, nature can strike with total, immobilizing force.